Taking the Plunge is the 19th episode of Season 8 of Full House. This is directed by John Tracy, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I talk about the events in the episode and share some thoughts. Unfortunately, this will be a little different to my usual Full House discussions. Usually I will go through basically everything that happens and go step by step and share some thoughts along the way. But for some reason, my Word document with all of my notes in is kind of broken. My notes are there. I can see little squiggly lines under my typing errors. I type very quickly when I'm making my notes. And I can highlight the text, but it's not white. I've changed it to black. I've highlighted it. I've copied it to a notepad and even tried to copy it elsewhere in the document. It's just invisible. I have no idea what has happened. If anybody knows the solution, please let me know. But unfortunately, I don't have my notes. I don't have time to go back and watch the episode and make notes again. So I'm basically going from memory, so I will not be dissecting everything that happens. But we have one main narrative, and this starts off because DJ actually finds out that she didn't get into her university of choice. So she's not feeling great. She has other options. She's just not going where she thought she'd go. And Kimmy says, well, at least you have options. And annoyingly, I had some really strong quotes from Kimmy that I wrote down and I can't share them. But Kimmy said some quite interesting things that really shows how Kimmy views Kimmy. She often comes across as really confident and full of herself. I don't mean that as a criticism. It doesn't come across that negatively, but she does come across as somebody who is very happy with who she is. But there were quotes in this episode that really showed that either deep down she's felt this way all the time, or maybe for the first time she's realising that because she hasn't necessarily tried very hard academically, she doesn't have that many options in life, maybe Kimmy at the moment isn't being the best version of herself. And she really realises this. So she decides to go off and get married to Duane. Duane is played by Scott Melville, and I just think the character is so funny. I feel like in real life he would irritate me, but in the episode the character is so funny. And DJ and Nelson find out about this, so they scribble down a note saying they've gone to Reno to go after Kimmy to stop the wedding, and off they go. But Comet being Comet, absolutely adorable. We actually start the episode off with some Comet tricks. Comet kind of chews up the note, and when the others find it, I think it was Michelle who found it in Comet's food bowl. Only half of the message is visible, and they think DJ has gone off to get married to Nelson. And this is reinforced because there's an empty jewellery box. Now, this jewellery box is actually because Nelson brought some earrings over for DJ to borrow to meet the Queen. First of all, I couldn't even imagine borrowing earrings. I don't like the idea of something being in my ear that's been in somebody else's ear. Not a fan. Even if I'm assuming it gets sterilised once it's returned to the rental store. But nevertheless. And does it come from a rental store? I have no idea. But either way, we do have this subplot with the Queen arriving, and Joey goes to meet the Queen. It's a really, honestly, really bizarre scene. And I would have liked to have been in the writing room when they came up with this idea, because it's very, very odd. I don't necessarily dislike it. It just is a little strange. But it gives us a bit of focus on Joey, and we don't get that much Joey focus. So I rather enjoyed that aspect of it, but it was a little strange. DJ and Nelson do arrive at Reno just in time. There's actually a Star Trek themed wedding happening when they arrive, and Kimmy and Duane are going to have a horror themed wedding, which I love, absolutely love it, love the outfits, fabulous theme, absolutely on board with that. And then the others arrive, Jesse and Danny arrive just in time, and of course they still think it's DJ getting married, and what follows is really beautiful. On the car ride there, they'd written some notes for the speech they wanted to give to DJ, to help DJ realise that just because she didn't get into her dream college, she doesn't need to just go and marry somebody. And she asked them to give Kimmy the speech that they were going to give to her. So they do. Danny starts to read out the speech, and after every line or two, Jesse translates it so it's more aimed at Kimmy. And there we have a lot of comedy. We do get some comedy there, but it's still really moving and really meaningful. And I do feel like we do get the sense, particularly from Jesse, that actually, despite the fact they always have remarks to make about Kimmy, they do actually really care for her, and they don't want to see her throwing her life away. Granted, if she gets married, she could get divorced, her life isn't over, but it does seem like she's in a headspace where she's just going to settle for anything so that she has something once she leaves school. And this speech really worked, and it got really emotional. So yes, it was funny, but it was really, really moving as well. And there we basically end the episode. I hope I haven't missed out anything too significant. I apologise if I did. I actually feel like this could have been a really good finale. Well, a moderately good finale, but better than the actual final. But we'll talk about that when we get there. As far as I remember, they actually found out the show was being cancelled with basically no time to put together a really heartfelt, moving finale. They did a decent enough job, but this one actually could have been a really great way to kind of indicate what DJ and Kimmy might have been doing after the show ended, but never really having to show us that, maybe leaving things open so that decades later, if they decide to bring the show back, i.e. Fuller House, it could leave things open with us wondering where they've been, giving them more creativity to craft their paths, and I think it could have been a good ending. Not that I wanted the show to end after this many episodes. I'm glad we still have another, I think, 6 episodes. So, looking forward to watching those. This was a really solid episode. As I said, I apologise for not being able to do as thorough a discussion as always. And certainly, I think Taking the Plunge is definitely a funny episode, but also a really moving episode of Full House.